There's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause what we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Here at the door, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Friday. We are here at the end of July. It feels like we've already gone through like 5 years in just July alone. And congratulations to those bingo winners who picked either weird seeds from China or aliens. So good luck to everyone else for the rest of August. This is what we're dealing with now. So yeah, end of work week. We can get through this. So, Andy, good morning. How are you? How are things going in lovely Canada?
We're actually going quite well. We've had sustained warm weather, which is always a bonus in Canada. I know that that's kind of problematic, because of our stance on climate change. But at this point in 2020, you take what you can get.
Yeah, well, exactly. So even here in Chicago, it's been on the cool side. So I put up my my stupid little adult wading pool. It's maybe 2.5 feet deep. I saved up, spent the $50 last year, and I've only been able to use it once because it has not been warm.
It fits one dog.
One dog and one person and a daiquiri. So you have to,
Oh, it is cup holders. You got the deluxe model. That's outstanding.
Well, what it is I have a inflatable chair. This is my self-care because you can't go anywhere. So it's an inflatable chair with a cup holder. So it's a tiny little ridiculous pool with a giant inflatable chair in it.
Well, thank God it's not bigger, because you might drift towards someone and then, and then all of a sudden you're no longer social distance.
That's exactly right. Right.
I'm sad that I didn't win the pool, because I took oysters growing legs, and clearly that didn't happen.
No, that was a long shot. I mean, aliens, I think, was a much easier one. So,
but it's like taking the Florida Marlins to win the World Series, right? if it happens, man, are you getting paid?
Oh, exactly. Right? So real quick, good morning to some of our lovely people who chimed in this morning from the web. Good morning, Sherry. Good morning, Mike. And for everyone else who's watching across our multiple streams, our tens of viewers, if you want to get involved in the conversation, ask a question, provide a comment, all of those things, type it in either on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube. We will see those comments here. If there's anything snarky, we appreciate that. All our MAGA folks, come on in, learn you something. So we enjoy that. We do read them, most of them, and we will participate and get that question on here. So real quick, some catch-up work to do. Portland protesters are staying in Portland. The federal troops are leaving. So that was a little bit of a happy news story.
And I don't think anybody had that in the pool.
No. So that one
that disqualified pretty much everybody.
That's exactly right. So that happened in Chicago. This was an interesting turn on the Black Lives Matter, because we had a police chief who was promoted 2 weeks ago. Now this one I'm going to watch and wait and see how this develops. But this particular police chief was a 30-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department. A black man with 2 children, married, all of this. He was found dead in his office just a few days ago, and they just released it. They're saying it was a suicide, self-inflicted gunshot wound. So, terrible turn of events. Because I think people need to recognize this is not an assault on the police. As much as the alt-right would like that to be the case, that is not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is due process and equal protection for everyone, which is, a constitutional right. So this is not necessarily defamation of the police. We just want those bad actors to be held accountable. Like, we know it is a fact that there are a lot of these people being brought into the military and into our police force who have no business being there. They're not stable. They're just not good actors, and they're bringing down all of these institutions, including the police force. So in Joliet, we had Stringer Harris talk about how the one whistleblower there, another decorated officer, was basically censured and taken off police duty because he was a whistleblower. So these are the things we're addressing here, in particular with the Black Lives Matter movement. Let's not get distracted from it, even from the protest in Portland, which brought up new issues about federal overreach and things like that. But
it brought them into the light.
Mm.
They've always kind of been there. It's just now you can see them.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So one of the other things that we've talked about over the last 2 weeks and following, and we're still trying to get Nathan Tankus on here. He's blown up on his social media, so we may be too little for Nathan now. So.
I think he started to read his own bio.
So we're talking about you, Nathan. But we wanted to get him on here because he just had a really nice piece published in The Guardian about this economic issue that's coming up. We see that the extra $600 from the CARES Act is ending now. It ends today for anyone who's on unemployment, and we have like 50 million receipts for unemployment. That's a lot of people, most in, I think, modern history. I'll have to go back and check. But
well, if you've been paying attention, just recently, numbers could have come out about the economy and showing a drop in the GDP. And, certain circles, and certainly in a neoliberal society, the GDP is a very important number, but it doesn't take into account certain factors of how people are actually doing in society. Regardless of that, the graph that I'm referring to is one that's come out over the last 50 years and shown that even the great financial crisis in 08 and 09 had a little dip on this table, which was the most severe over the last 50 years. Unfortunately, this second quarter of 2020 looks kind of like the leg of this table. It goes to basically to the floor. And if you're concerned about that and wondering how long a neoliberal regime can keep the stock market from crashing and maintain the fallacy that we have to collect taxes in order to spend, then those two ideas clash, and that can only result in what could be defined as catastrophic for the economy. And
absolutely.
Then it's pitchfork and torch.
Right, and it's this whole relationship, and this is some of the stuff, we'll get into this today. It's very complex, but not so much when you start to peel it back. So it's investment in your resources, and since we call people human resources, if you're not investing in your people in education, housing, things like this, then just from a business standpoint, if I have a bunch of employees that are either homeless or struggling with food insecurity, I don't have a productive workforce. And we know that attrition rates are really expensive when you have more people coming in and out all the time. Your productivity is down and it just costs you more. So we don't have the emphasis on our people, especially as a comparison in this pandemic to other countries where we got the average person here got a fraction of what the investment was in the UK and in Australia and Denmark, and what they were doing for their people to hold a stable economy. And now they were also doing social distancing and not arguing about masks and everything else, which, by the way, was funny on Twitter. The rest of the world has asked us to change it, the terminology, that we're not having a mask debate, because when you say it too fast, the rest of the world goes, America, what are you doing? So the great mask debate comes out completely wrong for the rest of the world. So there is no debate about masks. just let's be clear about that. It's about protecting health. So today we are so fortunate and thrilled to welcome somebody. This is a group that I've been watching for years personally. So I have a little bit of a fangirl thing going on, but this is Patriotic Millionaires. And we saw them come out. Now, I'll let them, Morris talk about their entire history, but they really came to the forefront under the Bernie Sanders campaign from 2016 because we were still struggling with the trickle down narrative, which we know is ridiculous and wrong. So here you had a group of very affluent Americans saying, no, they were repeating the Warren Buffett uh, the whole narrative about no, I'm not taxed enough. And I will tell you right now in 2020, I as an individual, as a disabled American and part business owner, I am taxed more than most corporations now, not just the affluent. So it's actually gotten worse. But so this morning we are so thrilled to have the chair of that organization, Patriotic Millionaires, Mr. Morris Pearl. So good morning, Mr. Pearl. How are you?
Hey, things are good. There's no signs of the pandemic here in this room inside my apartment in Manhattan.
Nice.
So I'm doing just fine. Thank you for being on your show.
Yeah. We're thrilled to have you. So I was going through your website. Now I do check in every once in a while. But you guys are still going strong. I'm so thrilled to see that. So your organization has been around for how long now?
10 years. It started in the lame duck session at the beginning of the Obama administration. We were trying to urge then President Obama to let the Bush tax cuts from 2001 expire for the very wealthiest of Americans. And he kind of thought we were kind of dorks for attacking from the left, or at least that's what Ms. Jarrett said he thought. But they realized that we were actually giving them political space to do what they wanted to do. And so the following year, in April, they asked us to stand on the podium with the president when he gave his famous Buffett Rules speech about how he had these rich Americans who were paying lower tax rates than their assistants who were standing next to them that day. So that was the origin of our organization. So we have hundreds of wealthy business people and investors from around the country. And we have a staff of, 10 or 20 people, mostly in Washington, but a few other places. And we help our members speak out, to write op-eds, to speak at rallies, to go to events, to talk to people like you and explain that actual business people, actual investors do not want gross inequality, do not want to live in a country with a few rich people, lots of poor people. That doesn't work. That's not where we can, invest money and grow businesses and do things. We need a country with millions of people who pay their bills every month, who buy premium ice cream and organic groceries and expensive shoes and all the things that help people like me get rich. So I can sit here in my apartment and do my nonprofit work and not actually have to do any work and pay, far lower tax rates than you do.
So what you're actually saying is it is a trickle up effect. If you pay people a livable wage, which I saw was on your website, what is a livable wage? Because now we're hearing that $12 an hour should be sufficient for a federal minimum wage. Where are you guys at with this?
We're supporting legislation for a federal minimum wage of $15 per hour. And frankly, at least around here, you're not going to live too well on $15 an hour. But that's what we're supporting for the federal minimum wage. And we believe that, for business people, even the people who are complaining about minimum wages, look at the guys in Seattle who are complaining when they raise their minimum wage. What are they doing now? They're trying to lease more space because all these people who got raises are eating out more and they need bigger restaurants. The guy who owns the restaurant is far more interested in how much money all the people sitting there drinking beer have in their pockets than about the wages of the one guy who's standing behind the bar pouring the beer. And they figure that out. Yeah, it's true. There's fewer low-wage jobs in Seattle now, The reason is because the people got raises and they don't have low-wage jobs anymore. They have medium-wage jobs. The overall number of people working in the restaurants is up. And they've changed from low-wage people to regular-wage people.
Okay,
So
so
these things work.
that is an amazing turnabout on what we've heard, this narrative that it kills business, because here in Illinois and Chicago, we get that all the time, that if you raise the minimum wage, you're going to kill business, and it just goes on. So hearing this from you and your group, really actually, that is a huge benefit for this fight for 15. And you're right, even here in Illinois, $15 an hour will get you a $900 a month apartment, but that's pretty much it. So by the time we get to 15, we need to be at 2025. And I think that's part of the problem. So as a business owner, we were just talking about unemployment is about to expire, the bonus, the CARES Act, and I know that your group is pushing back on the new Republican proposal, the Heroic Act, or I forget what they call it, but it's some variation of HERO.
The HEAL Act.
Okay, the HEAL Act. So tell me a little bit, why are you not real happy with their proposal?
Well, I mean, we've been supporting the HEROES Act, which was passed in the House 2.5 months ago now, in the middle of May. The HEAL Act, which was just announced on Tuesday, which is actually about 10 separate acts, but that's beside the point. I mean, I think they have the wrong approach to how to solve the problem. The way they want to, for instance, the act to help restaurant workers is the title. What does the act do? It establishes a tax deduction for people who eat in expensive restaurants and do business entertaining. So,
well, that's everybody, isn't it?
People who eat in expensive restaurants should have lower taxes. That is their way to help restaurant workers. Let me tell you something. If you want to help somebody, it's helpful to give money to the person who you're trying to help. If you give money to some other person
right,
and hope that it will indirectly help somebody, well, that's less direct, and that's not the solution that we would recommend.
Imagine, just give them money to, this is the same argument and same solution to homelessness, just give them housing.
Right, and it's typical, the tax cuts that the GOP always gives to large corporations and rich people. There's two words to describe it. It's called stock buyback.
Well, tax cuts for rich people are not the solution to all problems. I mean, it is the solution to the problem of wanting rich people to get richer, but it's not really the correct solution to any other problem. And it's not even a good solution to that problem. Frankly, if you want rich people to get richer and everyone to have the opportunity to get rich, as some people have, the way to do that is to run the country in such a way that you have lots of middle-class people who can pay their bills and buy expensive stuff every month. That is the way to help all the people in the country rise up in their economic well-being.
And yeah, and not add pork to a social investment program. I pulled this off your Facebook page. So for all of our viewers here, Patriotic Millionaires has a Facebook page. So go check it out, because occasionally they hit on a supreme quality grade snark. And this was one of the things that I pulled off the website this morning, Facebook page. Funny how everything is a handout besides generational wealth. And the reason why I love this particular meme is because we keep hearing that, especially when we talk about Medicare for all and raising the minimum wage, the fight for 15. It's socialism, it's dirty socialism, but the pushback is always, but wait a second, the people who are making these rules are getting socialist handouts themselves. And here, Patriotic Millionaires is talking about the generational wealth thing, which touches not just on inheritance, but we've seen from all of our studies and realization on the redlining that happened for generations. That was sponsored by the federal government in terms of loans for housing back in the 50s and 60s. So whereas white families were given loans for these modest homes, that turned into generational wealth, modest, minorities, Black people in particular, weren't open to those. So here we see these effects cascading generation by generation. So it's not just Donald Trump getting a couple $1 million from his dad. It goes throughout the entire system. So I thought that was a snarky way to talk about something that was really serious, especially in light of, like you said, the tax cuts with sunsetting under Bush. Now we have Trump's tax cuts. And if I remember correctly, I'm going to lose any benefit this year, this tax year, whereas it will increase for the wealthiest 2% in this country. Do I understand that right? Or
Yeah, and the point that you're making about generational wealth, I think, is very valid. I mean, I'm doing well, my kids are doing well. I mean, yes, we're good people and work hard, but it's not just that. I mean, we wrote a piece on our blog at patrioticmillionaires.org. So you can look at patrioticmillionaires.org and see an explanation of this. But essentially, as you said, in the 1950s, the Federal Home Administration subsidized mortgages. And one of their rules was they had to be in stable neighborhoods, and stable was defined as racially segregated. So that was why, if one Black family moved to your block, you could not sell your house to somebody who needed to get a mortgage. It couldn't be done. And that's why they were so afraid of these blockbusters. And that's why so many of our neighborhoods are segregated. And that's why so many Black people to this day do not have the kind of wealth that my family has, because it builds up over time. The fact that my parents in the 1950s and 60s and 70s were paying far lower mortgage rates than the parents of Black people of my age is why my children, in part, have far more extra money to spend than the children of Black people my age. And these things last for generations. You know, I sent my kids off to college and they never had to worry about, I don't know, student loans or part-time jobs or any of that kind of thing. You know, just the bills were just paid. And so they could worry about, you know, doing what they could to help their careers progress in, you know, whatever way they felt was, you know, most productive to them. Well, they did, and they're doing great. But that's not the way that things looked for a lot of other families. And that's a problem. And it's a problem that persists and will continue to persist until and unless we, as a society, do something about it.
excellent point. Excellent point. So Annie and I were discussing a little bit here about we want to know, and not, we're going to put you on the spot. We are MMT friendly when it comes to the purpose of taxation. So we have talked at length about the benefit of taxing an affluent society, a millionaire. To us, the value rests primarily in keeping y'all from buying our Congress people and manipulating the government away from policies that affect all of us. So are you familiar with the concept? What are your feelings on it? Not that we want to get into a big debate, but
yeah, I mean, you know, if you look at the picture, that's Stephanie Kelton's book behind me.
I thought I saw that.
That's what we,
Okay.
we've often talked about the need for reducing the influence of big money in politics. I want to get big money out of politics. I especially want to get my money out of politics so I can spend on other things. But yeah, and it's not even that the Congress people are like bad people or something. Most of them are, well, I don't know about most of them, but yes, I think most of them are good people. The problem is they spend all of their time doing fundraising. Even the ones who I like spend hours every week at 430 South Capitol Street in little phone booths getting, you know, dialing one after the other of donors. And that means they spend lots of time talking to donors. You know, when we have to, I mean, you know, when somebody talks about, oh, let's go talk to our Congress people, I don't even have to pick up the phone. I just can sit here and wait for someone to call me and talk to me and talk to probably more than I want to of members of Congress. So it's a matter of so quite a few of them, you know frankly, more than they need to about me and my family and my problems and, whatever I want to talk about. But they don't get to have a time to talk to all of their constituents. So when some question comes up of some obscure tax law or any kind of law, they can think to their mind, oh yeah, one of my constituents was talking to me about that. And this is a problem and that's why. And let's go and vote on it and fix the problem. And the person they've talked to is almost invariably one of their rich donors, not necessarily representative of all the rest of the people who live in their state. So that's the real problem, is that the Congress people spend so much of their time with the wealthy donor people. They don't really have as much insight from the views of everyone else who lives in their district.
Yeah, because they're going to cater to the people that they actually work for. So I did pull up on your website. You guys are doing a little bit more than just talking about it. You have two pieces of legislation right now, one in the House and one in the Senate. So I'm going to bring up the House one first because this one actually hits home for me. So this is the HR1735 Carried Interest Fairness Act. And I couldn't help but notice that this was introduced and it's stuck in the House Ways and Means Committee. And the reason why this is near and dear to my heart, because Brad Schneider represents District 10, Congressional District 10 here in Illinois. This is the same gentleman who has blocked Medicare for All because his wife is an investor in health securities. And now he's blocking this too. He's not a supporter on it. And in fact, I can't really fault him because your bill doesn't really have any sponsors on it. This seems like a no-brainer in the House where we have Democratic majority. What's going on here? You've got Bill Pasquarelli from New Jersey sponsored this, but he's kind of a lone wolf on this. How does that happen?
Yeah, it was sponsored every year by Sandy. I think his name from Illinois, but anyway, the current bill, yeah, it's not getting that much interest. And even the current president spoke in favor of it when he was running for office 4 years ago. I mean, the basic idea is that Congress has, in its infinite wisdom, established lower tax rates for investors than for people who work for a living. And we don't think that's a good idea. But even if you accept that, the problem that this particular bill addresses, and Tammy Baldwin's a Senate sponsor, and Sandy Levin had been the House sponsor for many years, the problem that we're really trying to address with this particular specific bill is that a bunch of people who don't actually invest their own money, but advise other people to invest money, now claim that they should take advantage of this lower tax rates because they're really partners of their clients. And so if their clients get a tax break, they should get a tax break too. It's kind of like if you are trying to sell your used car and the guy across the street offers to, wash it for you to make it look better. He says, well, since you're selling the used car and getting a tax break for that, I should get a tax break too, and the money you pay me for cleaning it, because we're in kind of a partners in this used car selling affair, or selling your house or anything else. There wouldn't be much tax on selling a used car, but it's kind of ridiculous. Even if you are a hedge fund investor, you pay lots of people, you have accountants and lawyers and investment advisors and all the people that work for the hedge fund management company. There's no reason why the owner of the hedge fund management company should pay lower tax rates than everyone else who's involved in this thing. So we think that's completely ridiculous. And they actually made it worse in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It used to be a crazy loophole that was like a combination of misinterpretations of different parts of this Internal Revenue Code. And now it's actually embedded in the Internal Revenue Code that hedge fund managers pay lower taxes than everyone else in certain specific circumstances. And we think that's just absurd, frankly. I mean, we use that as the poster child of ridiculous tax loopholes.
Yeah, it is absolutely ridiculous. The problem, and especially on the progressive left, is that people either refuse to or just don't get MMT and why it's important and how it explains how it's possible to fund all of the programs that the progressive left is looking at without trying to figure out who to tax to make it happen, right? And it was great, that, and Randall Ray, one of his statements in the podcast that we did with him was that people say that they want to tax rich people for this reason or for that reason. Why not just tax some people because they're just too rich, right? That they did. What's wrong with saying that? What's wrong with saying that if you have so much money that you can't possibly spend it all, then maybe there's a problem, especially when the inequality between different classes in your society is so huge.
Well, we have nothing against rich people.
No,
but I would advise everyone to become rich. I think it's a great idea. We just think that rich people should pay their fair share of the total taxes that are paid in the country. And that's currently, frankly, not the case. I think people that make this analogy between like your household budget and the national budget, not realizing that your household is fundamentally different than an entity that actually does print its own money, create its own currency, to be more precise.
Mhm.
And, we have this huge advantage in the United States of America of, frankly, creating money. And that's been true for decades, most of my life.
Yes.
And there's no reason why we cannot take advantage of that. We've had, I think the way I look at it is essentially the things the government issues, government bills, notes, bonds, various, treasury debt, essentially the same thing as money. And as long as the total amount of that increases at a lower rate or the same rate as the increase in the total value of all of the goods in our country, then as has been the case for decades, we're not going to see, problems with inflation or currency. And I think, frankly, that's been demonstrated by anybody who's looked at the, actual financial performance over the last almost 40 years, in that we've had growing amounts of money circulating in the economy without any ill effects of that. And we certainly can and should continue that.
Yes, and the Fed's target interest rate per year is 2%, which they've only been able to achieve a handful of times over the last several decades. Right?
Yeah.
The hyperinflation narrative that they're talking about, the interest rate narrative they're talking about, simply doesn't exist and is only an excuse to continue with neoliberal attitudes and neoclassical economics. And that's the unfortunate part of why Medicare for all is not being offered as a solution during a pandemic where people are supposed to stay at home.
Right.
Yeah, I don't ascribe motives to our lawmakers, but I agree with your points.
So
And
this
we're seeing people complaining. We're seeing people rising up. And that's really what I'm afraid of, is that typical people are not going to be willing to put up with this anymore. And we have to do something about that. We meaning society, has to take action. I can show you pictures of people marching with actual pitchforks, through Manhattan this last week.
Oh, wow. So in contrast to this, or maybe it's a correlation, earlier this week we had the antitrust hearings in Congress, and we had all of our social media titans, including Amazon's Jeff Bezos, who were testifying in front of Congress. Now, Bezos himself has more personal wealth than nations, right? So he is now the richest person beyond wildest dreams. And we got to watch him testify about how his business operations kind of model his personal, to the point where he was making the case for breaking antitrust laws that aren't really being enforced anyway, that but definitely stifle entrepreneurship. I think people forget, like, UPS was started by two guys in a bike, right? So that's what we used to have in this country, because we had less of an economic disparity and people could go and start a business in their garage. But then this week we saw Bezos making the case for why he should be a trillionaire and why Amazon should be able to crush competition. So it leaves us all, on the 98% of us below, as you said, with pitchforks walking through Manhattan. What recourse do we have against somebody like that? I mean,
Well, I think that we need a new sort of economic and legal theory. Sort of antitrust has traditionally been companies, getting rid of the competition in order to raise prices. And so it's hard to argue that Amazon has had that problem. I mean, I get stuff on Amazon all the time. This shirt I ordered on Amazon. It's easier than schlepping a mile from here to a store. I can just steer my computer and order something. The next day, I get a package with a new shirt. It's great. Works fine. And I invest in Amazon too. Probably $1 million worth of stock in Amazon, and that's great too. For me, of course, half the people in the country have no stock investments at all, and so the stock market hasn't done them any good. But it's been fine for me and my family. But I think what we need is a different theory of something different beyond antitrust. The antitrust originally meant a bunch of companies getting together and forming a trust, like they called the group, of all the different oil companies. It was called a trust because they had a trustee who was in charge of running it. And so that's why the antitrust laws were called antitrust, because they were aimed at Rockefeller's trustees. But I think we need a new theory that simply says, kind of the way we said that television stations, when there was only possible to have a few of them in any place, they were regulated by the Federal Communications, not because of antitrust concerns, but because there naturally would only be a limited number of television stations at that time, before cable TV, and that because there could only be a limited number, a few would, that limited number would have the entire market, and you couldn't start another one. And in the same way that, and electrical power companies too, we don't want a bunch of competitive companies digging up our streets and putting up light poles and stuff like that. So we naturally only have one power company in most places. So I think we need a recognition that other things, other things also have sort of natural monopolies sometimes. Like it'd be very unlikely for another company to start something like Facebook, because Facebook already has billions of people involved. And so if you want to advertise to people, well, you want to advertise on Facebook. You don't want to advertise on this other thing that only has a small number of people. And if you want to join a social network, well, you want the one that has billions of people on it. You don't want this new one that just started. And so I think other companies such as these, like Facebook, also have some kind of a natural monopoly. And so that should be regulated in some way, kind of the way you regulate electrical utilities. The electrical utility company, there's only one that serves your place probably, and you have a commission of your part of your state government that controls the price that you pay for power. And so I think similarly, we need some kind of recognition that some of these companies have natural monopolies in their fields. And so there should be some kind of regulation to prevent them from using that power to stifle other new companies. The European Union is now looking at whether Amazon should be required to not have their internal products have an advantage over other companies' products when selling them on their Amazon marketplace. And that's a legitimate concern because they have a natural monopoly in this marketplace. When you go to their website and search for something and find linen shirts or peanut butter or whatever you want. And so if they also are competing with the other companies selling stuff, then there's a conflict there. And that's something that we, the people acting through our elected representatives, should deal with.
I've actually, was it, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, was that Kelton or Pavlina was talking about the same thing, that Amazon was playing in both spaces and they were
Yes.
buying up and artificially lowering prices. I can't recall who that was, but
Well, when you the other problem is that when you have the buying power of a large company like that, right? Like, I mean, like this, and I think the business model was basically started by Walmart, where they would go into a place, to a small town, offer a bunch of factory jobs to people, and they said, okay, well, we're going to pay these people this amount of money to produce a product ourselves that we could flood the market with. And a lot of times they would come up with a different idea, and that city would be devastated by the fact that Walmart would pull out of it and say, we've changed our mind, right? It's our company, we can do what I want, and we mothball the thing, and then all these people are out of work, and that is just too much power in the marketplace, right? And it's anti-competition.
Yeah, I used to live in Burlington, Vermont in the mid-1970s at one point, and a company wanted to create a mall just outside of the city of Burlington in Williston, the Pyramid Mall Company that used to build these big indoor malls. And that was denied by an environmental regulation, but the basic grounds were that they would so disrupt the tax base of the surrounding communities that they would not be able to, operate because other businesses were out of business, that they would not be able to operate, their essential services anymore. I think we have to recognize to people that certain things are not good for the vast majority of people, and that we should have rules and regulations about those. That's always been true for protecting, rich people. You can't go, start a hog farm in the middle of a expensive residential suburb. They have zoning laws to prevent that. They have all kinds of rules and regulations about that. But it's never been a problem of starting some kind of business that disrupts the tax base that affects, regular working class people. And I think we have to recognize that they also need some help from their government regulations sometimes. That's one of the themes that we're trying to emphasize, is that the rich people have always done these things. Even the defund the police movement, the Republicans have been defunding law enforcement, particularly IRS auditing enforcement, for years. We have far fewer IRS enforcement officers now than we did 20 years ago, because that's always been under attack. So the rich people are used to going to their elected representatives and complaining about being harassed by law enforcement officers, and actually getting changes, getting both new regulations and less money for law enforcement. I think now everyone else, besides marching with pitchforks, is also taking up that same kind of rights and privileges that the rich people have always had.
that's an excellent point. I'm definitely going to quote you on that one, because it's a beautiful take on it. The disparity between the haves and the have-nots, or in this case, the affluent and the 98%. But real quick, we did get a comment from Sherry. And Sherry makes the point that you were actually just making, that we're not enforcing the laws that we have. And she points to back in the 80s, the ideas based on Robert Bork, which I'm not familiar with. I'm sorry, Sherry. Minimize concerns about industry concentration in favor of potentially lower consumer prices. And we keep seeing this over and over again. Something as simple as a cell phone here, where my company, Sprint, just merged with T-Mobile. Did my prices go down? No, but I look across the pond in Europe and they're paying $35, equivalent to what I'm paying over $100 for, because they have that kind of competition. I'm not going to make you go into a full free market explanation, but I think the blog posts that you guys have, everyone go check those out, because you guys have been keeping up with daily headlines in a very economic, simplistic way that explains all of this. So aside from Sherry's good observation here, what can we do to help you? So you've got these two bills out here, one in the Senate and one in the House. They get introduced every year and there's not a lot of traction, but oh, by the way, we're also activists here. So do you want some help with this?
Yeah, I mean, look at patrioticmillionaires.org. You can sign up to be a friend of Patriotic Millionaires and get our email reports on what we're doing. We have, well, now they're virtual events. We have events pretty often. And we do advocacy work. We get people to go to things. We are trying to change, the policies through changing our elected representatives. So we've been working on, endorsing candidates who are running for office. We have an affiliate that does that, and we are, trying to do the best we can to get something done. But there are obviously dozens of advocacy organizations. And it seems hard to meet someone on the other side these days, although I know there are a lot of people on the other side. So that's where we are.
Excellent, excellent. Any final thoughts, Andy, before we let Morris go and get on with his day?
I just think that this is a perfect example of how leaderless and unorganized the progressive left is, and how we all have to come to terms with the fact that despite small differences between groups, we all are sitting in the same boat. We just have to learn how to paddle together. Right? And I think that when you come from a place on the high road for looking towards a just society where all boats rise and life gets better for everyone in the country, not just the small percentage at the top, then it all works out. And life, people don't die needlessly. People don't go bankrupt because of medical debt. People get to go to post-secondary education despite the fact that they come from a working class family, and all of the work that we all do together bears the fruit of that, and that's so important. And I love your ideas, and more power to you and what we can do to help and stay together on this.
Great to be in your show, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look at patrioticmillionaires.org.
Excellent, excellent. I'm sorry for talking over you there, but yeah, I think we can do some good work here with the House bill in particular and the Senate bill, and make sure that people get on the phone and start calling and applying a little bit of pressure. I don't know why my reps aren't on either of these bills as sponsors. This seems like a no-brainer, especially during a pandemic and a downturn. So I know that I will certainly start making phone calls, and I do encourage everyone else to sign up on patrioticmillionaires.org and start getting their newsletter. Any final thoughts you want to leave us with before you get out of here?
Well, thank you very much. We're trying to do a lot of things. We're talking to our representatives and senators about getting the HEROES Act through, and hopefully the Senate will make some progress soon. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Patriotic Millionaires. And just real quick administrivia, words are hard today. We have another great, actually pretty edgy, and this is saying much, edgy for Rome Bethia and Rome's Rebellion. That's coming out tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern. And he brings up some really salient points about basically Becky with a latte, white liberals. Can you trust them? And that is, it's one of those questions we really have to tackle. So other than that, Andy, got anything coming up in the next week, or?
No. It's a big day in our household because my 21-year-old is getting her own place, and we moved all the furniture yesterday, and as much as I'm going to miss her, I'm really looking forward to the towels moving back up to the bathroom.
Excellent, congratulations. As an empty nester, I have to tell you, the best advice is the day she moves out, do your tidying, whatever, and then completely convert that room to something else. Otherwise, she'll come back. So, sewing room, whatever you got to do. So,
live stream studio.
yes, let's do it. So, All right, that's it for us. We will get out of here just a little bit early, but definitely take a look at Patriotic Millionaires. These are people actually making good proposals and having good counter arguments that we struggle with sometimes at the center and the left, pushing back on this narrative. As Morris said, it was beautiful. They've done their accountability and defunding of their police force, which is the IRS. We should be able to make this argument too. So go out and take a look at their blog. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this morning. We will be back bright and early on Monday, 10 a.m. Great lineup coming for you during the week, so stay tuned right here on DLF. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everything thought we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Speeding the facts.